today, please again add that into the chat section or the Q&A section. We will have some interactive polls, and I will be asking you at the end how you heard about this presentation, so that will be a piece of what you're going to get way at the end of this. We will have Molly, who will be answering some questions from Sugarloaf, that will be answering some questions in the Q&A along the conversation, and John will be moderating the whole presentation today. Does that cover most of it, John?
I think it does, and thank you again, Kelsey. Greatly appreciate you helping make this happen tonight. Looking forward to sharing what we have going on the North Shore, and we have almost like a lightning round of expertise coming here over the next 2 hours, and hopefully you can hang in there with all of us. A lot of different voices, a lot of different experts in the field, as well as we have expertise of actual landowners on the North Shore who are involved in restoring the North Shore's forest landscape. So thank you again for joining us tonight. I appreciate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a brief presentation on the North Shore Forest Collaborative. Then I'll hand it off and do this sort of transition from one speaker to the next. So I'll begin my screen sharing with the North Shore Forest Collaborative.
Perfect, John. As you're transitioning, I just want to let everybody know this is being recorded. We'll have this available next week if needed, but just a reminder that it is being recorded.
You might notice that I'm actually in my house, and that's why there's another phone ringing. So, okay. North Shore Forest Collaborative. So we're going to be focusing on the lost forests of the North Shore, and so we're going to set the Wayback Machine, if you remember back in the good old days of Peabody and Sherman, to pre-1890, and call up a great image of at least what's in our mind of what the forest landscape might have looked like back during that period, and where exactly did this lost forest go? And we have very good evidence that due to a significant amount of logging that occurred of some of the longer lived tree species, such as white pine and cedar, really took out a significant number of trees. And while that in and of itself might not have presented a problem, what occurred shortly thereafter on the heels of the logging was significant wildfire damage that burned the forest, as well as nutrient soils right down to bedrock in some places, which made it very difficult for the white pine to grow back. And so a lot of other species came in, along with a certain species that really loves to eat green things in the wintertime. So we also had invasive species making their way in, but white pine were significantly decimated. And the deer that came in, which tend to yard in the wintertime, which means to group together to get to the warmer climate along the coastal shoreline, would easily browse on any young shoots coming up. So very difficult for the trees to regrow without assistance. So we're doing a little pre and post 1890 period of time here for you. So what was evident is pre-1890, we had significantly less aspen and birch versus pine, which are at a higher percentage of the landscape. And then today we have where we have birch and pine kind of running in opposite directions here, with a lower percentage of pine on the landscape. So our challenge today is we have opportunist species such as the birch and the brush and the grasses are taking advantage of the condition. They ultimately are sort of the wrong tree for the certain soil conditions that we have on the North Shore. Not that they can't grow here, and they can certainly grow, but not to a very great extent in a way that will allow the tree to grow to maturity. So you see a lot of collapsing birch and then trying to regrow again in the same place. And so we have an ecological imbalance. We're trying to address that. So what does it look like? We know that it's such a vast area that we're talking about on the North Shore that we can't do it all at once, but we can certainly have significant impact. If we start to add in tree species that help rebuild that forest, and this is just a kind of a cute example of what that means to the forest. Now, once you start building in these trees, now you start seeing little critters showing up in different places. So you have a much more effective forest, more ecologically healthy forest than what we have currently. So the North Shore Forest Collaborative, what is it exactly? It's a grassroots cooperative association formed in 2011, brainchild of some former Forest Service employees, retired now, but still actively involved, along with others. And a lot of those people are actually on this call today. Now, the focus is on North Shore forest restoration. It's a collaborative in terms of we seek common landscape interests. So we work together on those areas where we have common interests. The mission is to revitalize and maintain a healthy and functioning forest ecosystem on the North Shore. How do we do that? There's really three main areas, and that's restoration by replanting basically a lot of the tree species that we talked about here already. Collaboration on all lands. It doesn't matter whose land it is, whether it's private or held by an agency or a nonprofit. And then education, how do we share our expertise and inspire others to do likewise. North Shore Forest Collaborative, geographically, it's about 3.5 miles inland from Lake Superior, and then runs the North Shore from Knife River all the way up to the Canadian border. So it's think of the Highlands area overlooking the lake down towards the shore, and you'll see that's our focus area. Tree species we tend to focus on, doesn't mean these are the only trees that we work with, but white pine, anything that starts with the word white at the beginning, white pine, white spruce, white cedar, and then tamarack and yellow birch also added in as key species to get back into the landscape. What makes it also challenging, but also allows us to collaborate to a broader extent, is the land ownership. This is a great map showing the pattern of ownership. You can see actually private land, which is sort of that peach colored portion, is about 40% of the total land ownership along the North Shore. So great to have a lot of private landowners working with us. And within the collaborative area, just to give you some idea of the complexity of jurisdictions, we have both counties, as I mentioned, 270,000 acres. There's 8 state parks, Superior National Forest, we have the reservation, and we have state forests, as well as the scenic drive. And as I mentioned, private lands equates to about 6,000 parcels of land, individual parcels. So this is just a quick slide. You don't have to memorize this for tonight, but you'll notice some of the obvious names that would get involved in such an effort, as well as some surprising, maybe new ones, and maybe some others that are just like, oh, it's interesting that they're involved as well. Restoration work. A lot of the focus is on building a diverse, healthy, and resilient North Shore forest. Landowner fencing program is a good example of that. You've probably heard about it. It's discount pricing on some fencing, provided at least 40,000 trees planted in cage that we're aware of on private lands. And that's brought to us through the Weeks Family Foundation, very, very generously over the last 4 years. And we have a neighbor-to-neighbor program, which is through the University of Minnesota Extension Service. They have provided a grant to help build ambassadorship amongst private landowners who will also carry the message to their neighbors and try to help them do likewise on their properties. And then we're also very involved in seeking grants and had some good success since 2011. We're over $1 million of helping facilitate the seeking of those grants and acquiring those grants to build up restoration on other properties. Collaboration I'm going to just throw up a bunch of logos here and just pick out your favorite or see some new surprising faces that might be involved in forest restoration work, working collaboratively with others. Education, a big piece of the puzzle here. Try to do so a number of different ways, working with our partners and associates, and try to build awareness. We try to exchange technical knowledge and work on how restoration isn't just a one-shot deal. It's typically a long-term commitment that you're involved with. And then foster that peer-to-peer information sharing. So how can you help? And that's part of the message tonight, as you hear not just from me, but from others. If you're a private landowner on the North Shore, you can consider restoration on your own property. And I'm guessing that's why some of you are either here trying to find out more or how to build more of a community in your area, focus on restoration. You can talk to your neighbors about working together. And you can also seek agency advice. Again, we brought in the experts who have agency incentive programs that may help you in your efforts. And if you're new as an agency coming in tonight and are interested, you can join in the effort. And you can do so. You can talk with your staff, talk with management about the North Shore Forest Collaborative and help provide resources, or just begin talking with us, see if there's ways that we can work together. And if you're just a general citizen who has an interest in the North Shore, you can also volunteer. You can volunteer your time. Northwoods Volunteer Connection is a good opportunity to go to their website, and they have a number of different activities. They're not just all focused on the North Shore, but certainly it might be opportunities to get involved in tree planting or trail work, you name it. And then lastly, I may have mentioned that Sugarloaf, the North Shore Stewardship Association, they are a nonprofit organization devoted to working on the North Shore and building out that community. They do have a donation page you can go to on their website. You can do it all electronically and contribute if you so choose. And that would be great. Make sure you note that it's North Shore Forest Collaborative efforts that you're really trying to donate towards. And there's a small fund that they're holding on behalf of the North Shore Forest Collaborative at Sugarloaf. So with that, that's my brief presentation to introduce you to the North Shore Forest Collaborative. I'm leaving here with the website showing northshoreforest.org. And we also have a Facebook page for North Shore Forest Collaborative. Please try to join us. We would love to have you. We have over 100 people who recently joined our Facebook page. And then our email is nsfcstaff@gmail.com. And I did kind of forewarn you that this is a little bit of a lightning round of presentations. I apologize for that with this virtual world that we live in these days. And sometimes that's just the only way we can make this happen effectively. So again, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I will pass the baton now over to one of our private landowners, who is Jeff Ganifke. He lives up near Grand Marais, and I'd like to share with you some of his actual work that he's doing on his own property, and maybe help inspire you to do likewise on yours. So with that, Jeff, I will stop sharing my screen. I think I have, and you're up and running. Make sure you're unmuted.
Hope you're having a good evening. I'm Jeff Ganifke. I live up about 4 miles west of Grand Marais, and kind of go through what I've done to get started in this and what I've done with the land that I've got here. This is a picture of the of the 1910 fire that affected the area quite a bit. The picture here is actually looking from the harbor in Grand Marais. You can see the lighthouse on the left looking to the west out toward Terrace Point and that general direction. The dispatches from the telegraph operator said that there was fires running all the way from Good Harbor Bay, Terrace Point, all the way into Grand Marais, all along this area here. So I find all over my land the burnt stumps of logged, cut trees, and then now they're burned. And I'll show you that actually here in a bit. This is a 1936 aerial photograph of the area. And you have Terrace Point here. And all this area is wide open. This is, of course, after the fires and logging that had taken place. It's a pretty barren area, actually. A couple of the old maps. This one shows Highway 7, if you're familiar with County Road 7, was actually the main state highway. It didn't follow the coastline, didn't follow the shoreline yet at that time. So Highway 7 was actually the North Shore Road at that time. Kind of interesting. This one is from 1920, and it shows a road running from the town out to one of the first fire towers in the area, just off the Cascade River, off of Pike, what's known now as Pike Lake Road, actually. And this is on my land. A lot of the trees in this area were planted by two large CCC camps in 1933 to 35. Good Harbor, which was up along the Cascade River and Pike Lake Road, actually, and then the state, primarily working on state land, was the camp at Cascade River. And this is some of the guys, actually, that did the planting in my area of these trees now that are all about 80 years old. And it's kind of nice to see them, that they've survived and really generated where things are heading now in some areas. And here they are planting. You'll notice the land is pretty open. A lot of detritus left from logging and fires, but not a lot of trees. And this is, I do have one old growth or older growth white pine on my land. And this is it here. And it's the base of it. And this thing has generated a lot of small trees that it keeps trying to put out year after year after year. Of course, in the past, the deer have all gotten them, but it's become something of a tradition for me to go through the woods and look for these small seedlings that are out there. And they're all over the place, actually. And then you're able to cage them and save them. And it actually saves the person from having to plant a tree. In fact, here's a stump of an old white pine, fairly close to that one I just showed you. And you can see it's burned, and it you could kind of make out that it was cut here. But within it, I found this little white pine growing. So it's kind of the circle of life of the thing, of the burnt out stump of the white pine, and then this little one coming up in it. And here's another one. I actually, when I took these slides, I found about 4 of them out in the woods. Here's one that they seem to catch a lot of times on down trees in the moss to get started. And it's well worth it to go looking for them and then caging them and letting them take off on their own. You just need I usually carry the small plastic cages with me. And what I've done on my land, it seems to work fairly well. I'll find a tree, like in this case, it's an older yellow birch, and I'll go from the road, logging road, or whatever road I'm near or able to drive. I've got a John Deere Gator on, and then I'll walk the land to this tree, kind of as a landmark, and clear a path to it, and then start expanding out from there. This is the yellow birch. And this is another one I did using a red sugar maple as an aiming point to go on. And then this is what I cut out. I cut out all the popple, and it's primarily popple. I have balm and gilead that have come up, diamond willow, less desirable species that are there, and just get it ready for planting, and then expand out to either side of this kind of a trail that's here, opening that's here, and then start pushing off in either direction. And it takes a lot of work because it has to also be maintained, because the forest will try to reclaim it every spring, and all summer long, you're kind of in a battle with it. And actually, you can see here in one of these openings, you can see a couple of little maple trees, Kate, started to come up, sugar maples. Now that the soil is bare and they're open, they're able to get started. Kind of neat to see. What I've kind of gone into is using X closures. I'll use a couple, 3 rows of fence, and then put the trees inside of that. Now, it wasn't recommended to me to do this, and primarily because the fear of the trees falling on the fencing and then the deer being able to get in there. But I'm pretty active and out in the woods all the time, even in the winter time, so I'm able to keep up with them. And it's just worked better for me. It seems to be a better use of my time and resources that I've got. And this is kind of another shot here. And then inside here, there's a number of white pine. Again, you have to come in here and mulch the trees as best you can, and then try to cut back all the brush and undesirable weeds and plants that are coming up in it. Another shot of it. You can see actually this is the white pine back here. And this is another one that generated from that tree, from the big white pine. Another shot of an exposure. Another little white pine. This is in the same area. It's an older black spruce. Just interesting that how it regenerates. The branches grow into the moss, and then they come up as another tree. I just find that fascinating that it regenerates itself. That's one of the ways it regenerates itself. Pretty tree. I really like them. This is one of the white pines I found that it's a little bit older actually, and it had been seeded by that older white pine. Another one that's about 15 feet tall here from that, again, from the white pine. It had been surrounded by balsam fir, and I think that's what protected it, and I've since cleared all the balsam fir out of there. And this, a lot of what you're doing, one of the benefits, or one of the great ways of just gaining control of the land, and it's a little bit easier, is just releasing trees. All these white spruce were in a mixture of popple and hazel brush and just really kind of junky trees. And you clean that out, and then that releases these. You can see they're all taking off now on their own, and they'll establish a little grove of white spruce here, where that would have not have happened. It may have happened, but it would have happened further down the line and taken some time. But releasing trees is a great thing to focus on too. And this is another where I've cleaned out quite a swatch of popple and hazel brush, and within it you find some sugar maples. I mean, and they really take off once they're cleared of having all the stuff that's sucking all the resources out of their area. And same here, and you can see how thick, I haven't got off into some of this area. You can see how thick the popple stand is here. Same area. This is one of my yellow birch. They've done real well. I've got a number of older ones on the land, so I kind of looked into finding yellow birch to plant, and I found a Boreal nursery down by Esco, down by Duluth, grows yellow birch. And I've planted a number of them, and I've had really good luck with them. They seem to like the soil a lot. And obviously, because the older ones are here already. So just a neat tree. And of course, the deer seem to like them. I've had to cage them. They seem to like the top growth on them as the deer go wandering around browsing. Here's one of the sugar maple that just appeared. It's on its own. This one I haven't caged yet because the deer don't seem to get down that low to eat those leaves, but I'll have to, I'm sure, next year. And here's white cedar that I planted inside one of the exclosures. And they seem to do very well here also. I'm guessing that at one time, being as near to Cascade State Park as we are, which has a number of white cedar, that they did grow here, that it was a species in this area as well. And so, like I say, they've done fairly well. In kind of damper areas, they seem to like the heavy clay soil. This is another area behind my home here that I've cleared out. This is actually, there's ledge rock underneath a lot of this. And a white pine planted. This is a yellow birch. He's really outgrowing now his caging. He's got about 2 feet above the cage now. And a white cedar that's also flourishing. And a red oak. Had some problem where the tops of them have died off. I don't know if that was due to the cold weather or what, but and these have since been caged. I've kept these caged since I planted them, and because I think the deer would like to have at them too. And this is red maple. Again, this is already extended beyond its tube. These are the tubes I use. I in fact, carry with me when I go out into the woods. If I find small white pines or some other tree I want to protect, then I put this on it, and usually I'll have some stakes with me that I carry in a backpack to stake this enclosure in. Red maple again, or sugar maple, I should say. This is a red maple. Red maple's done very well too. Now this is behind that. You can see what I've done clearing this out. And within this, there was a number of yellow birch or a white birch that I've left. There's also some sugar maples and white spruce that were mixed in there. So you have to look at it ahead of time and go through it before you just go cutting everything down. But I started replanting red maples in here. And I'll go on also, I think, with some yellow birch, because there's yellow birch off to the right in this picture here, older ones. So I think they'll grow well here too. And this is a view from the top of that hill out over my house, and then there's Good Harbor Bay right here. Terrace Point is off to the right, and Lake Superior, of course. And another shot of that is in the process of clearing. You can see how heavy this stuff gets. Just terribly dense. The forest will really reclaim anything given just half a chance to get back into it again. Just one of the older white pines. Now this one's getting to be about 9-10 years old. And a tamarack that's doing well. Of course, Mike Reichenbach actually gave me the idea of putting this. There's rebar in here that I put around it because the young bucks like to rub their new fur off their antlers on the tamaracks for some reason. They really go at it. In fact, they've destroyed some of them, so I've had to do this. But this has worked well to put the rebar in to protect them. Just another shot of a yellow birch in this cleared area. Again, they're doing very well. And this is just another shot of that area, kind of a plantation of trees that the CCC planted in 1933, 34, and 35. Actually runs all the way down to, if you'll notice when you come in, heading up to Grand Marais, by the wayside at Cutface Creek, on your on the north side of the road, you'll see all the red pines that they planted. The red plant, and there's a number of red pine I have in here, but they don't regenerate very well. I'm guessing because this is not their favorite soil. The white spruce, of course, they do all over the place, but the red pine don't seem to be as able to get young ones started. Though the older ones have done fairly well that I have here. So again, they're all about, well, 80 years old or so. And this is just a shot of, we have in my neighborhood here, we've got a neighborhood group that kind of has been useful for me to share stuff about the collaborative. Like here, I had a posting on Facebook of our fencing for trees became available. So I just put a note for people to, you know, in the neighborhood that are, luckily in my area, I think everybody's kind of into replanting and restoring the forest in the area. So it's received fairly well. And that's about all I've got, John.
Well, Jeff, I don't know if you have a clock in front of you, but that was spot on timing wise. I do want to thank you again, Jeff Ganifke, for
Sure.
sharing very personal efforts in restoring the North Shore on your own property on the North Shore there near Grand Marais. So thank you, Jeff. We will, as I mentioned, we're going to be moving through presentations relatively quickly here. If people have questions, they can put a note in the chat, as Kelsey had mentioned. And with that, we're going to be passing the baton for presentations over to Michaela Klingeman from the Soil and Water Conservation District out of Cook County. So with that, Michaela.
Yeah, thank you, John. Get my screen sharing here going. All right, looks like we have everything up and running now. So again, my name is Michaela Klingeman, and I am a conservation technician with Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District. I've been here for a little bit over 4 years now, and I've worked on a variety of projects, but my primary work has focused on shoreline restorations with native plants, some stream restoration projects, as well as some water quality and erosion reduction projects through our cost share program, in addition to some forestry projects. So tonight I wanted to share a little bit about our conservation district, some services that we have to offer, as well as some general tips for planning a tree planting project next year, kind of with the wrapping up of the fall season and start of the winter. It opens the door for an opportunity of planning that maybe isn't as easy to do in the busy summer months. So to start off with, what are soil and water conservation districts? Maybe you've heard of us before, or maybe you've recently opened up your election ballot and saw soil and water conservation supervisor. Wonder what that's for. Well, that's us, and soil and water conservation districts are political subdivisions of the state, and they are governed by a 5-member board of elected supervisor. So each county in Minnesota has their own conservation district, and you get to vote for those supervisors, who in turn direct the work of the staff as well as the district in general. So really, conservation districts fit a specific role in that they are charged with conserving natural resources, specifically soil and water, but mainly our role is here for you as the private landowners. And so while other agencies may specialize in public land or in different areas, our kind of wheelhouse is really serving you as private landowners to help protect our natural resources. So every district has kind of their own mission and vision, but here we are really here to conserve and protect soil and water resources in Cook County, and you guys as the private landowners are the missing piece to the puzzle because we can't do anything without you. So that's the general idea of what a district is and who we are, but what does that mean for you as a private landowner and what types of services can we offer? So we like to group our services into two general categories, and the first that I'll talk about is what we like to call technical assistance. So technical assistance can be in the form of a site visit in which district staff will meet with you on your property to evaluate concerns or any needs that you may have, and we can offer recommendations and provide you with some direction on how to address those resource concerns. We also do a lot of outreach events. We provide educational materials, we host workshops, and we try and keep that on a variety of topics, but we've done some in the past on stormwater management, invasive species identification and prevention, land use planning, shoreline restorations, but we try and rotate through topics and kind of give a variety of information to different target audiences throughout the year. And then we can also help you through program navigation, as there are a lot of different options out there for you as private landowners, especially as it relates to forestry practices. So that's kind of a gist of what we offer for technical assistance, but we also offer financial assistance, and that's really to design or construct conservation practices. We have access to engineering services, and we can provide project management and construction oversight. And we also have an annual cost share program that you are eligible to apply for as a landowner in Cook County, and that can provide up to 75% of project costs that the district can cover for you, and the other 25% would be your match contribution to your project. But in addition to that, we do operate in the grant world and apply for additional funding on a case-by-case project need basis if those cost share funds maybe don't meet the project expenses. So what kind of projects do we work on, or what have we done so far? And to give you an idea, I put together some photos, but maybe you've noticed some of these around town. And if you've ever been in downtown Grand Marais, you'll see there's a series of rain gardens. That's something that the Conservation District has done a lot of, and the one shown is right in front of the library. So we work on stormwater management projects such as flow paths to reduce erosion. We do green infrastructure, like managing runoff through rain gardens or other best management practices. We also dabble in some stream restoration projects, and we try and incorporate some natural channel design rather than hard armoring or riprap practices. We do native shoreline restorations, primarily on inland lakes, but we've also done some on Lake Superior. We help with stream connectivity and erosion reduction projects, and that can be in the form of culvert replacements or removals when appropriate. We do some stream bed stabilization, and that can be on anything from a large river, such as the Reservation River, to small tributaries into larger bodies of water. And then we also have some forestry practices that we've done. And I know that's a broad term, so and the focus more of this meeting. So I wanted to dive into that further to give you a better idea of what the district has to offer. So cost share funds are eligible for forestry practices that protect water quality and reduce soil erosion. Really, anytime you're planting a tree, those benefits go hand in hand. So a lot of the times those projects are eligible for cost share. And in general, we can assist with implementing practices defined in your forest stewardship plans, such as site preparation, tree planting, maybe some forest stand improvement, balsam removal. Those types of practices are usually applicable. And really our cost share program works best on a smaller scale tree planting projects where a larger project may be more suitable for other programs, such as the Environmental Quality Incentive Programs through the NRCS or the Department of Natural Resources Cost Share Program, which is where the district can help in and kind of direct you in some program navigation. But we also, a perk of being a district is we have some access to competitive grant funding to access Conservation Corps through labor for assistance. So if you have a project that you feel like maybe you just need some help getting some trees in the ground, or maybe you do need funding as well, and that's to feel free to reach out to the district, because annually those grants come up for us to be able to apply for. And if it's just a matter of getting you some extra hands to get the trees in the ground, we're happy to help in that way. And again, the funding, if you were to apply for cost share, it can cover material costs to install, conservation projects. That's comprehensive, from the trees to the weed mats to cages, to getting people in there to install it. So just some general ideas of projects that we can help with, and a little bit more of the scope. Another forestry related service that the Conservation District offers is we have an annual native tree and shrub sale. So every spring, typically in early May, is when we distribute those orders, and we do it right here in Grand Marais. But we also partner with Lake and South St. Louis Soil and Water Conservation District. So there's pickup locations in Duluth and Two Harbors. So the sale includes hardwoods, evergreens, shrubs, and it's really a good variety at a reasonable cost. They're sourced from the State Forest Nursery and Schumacher's Nursery. And the bundles vary in size, but you typically get around 25 trees for $40. There are some smaller bundles of 10, just depending on what's in stock for that year, and it changes too. But the nice thing is that you are able to purchase them in smaller bundles, whereas if you were to order directly from the State Forest Nursery, you may need to order trees in the hundreds or sometimes 500s, and so it's a good opportunity to get a smaller amount for a good price. The one thing I did want to note, you'll see in those photos, they're in bags, and pretty much the whole bag is full of roots. And they are bare root seedlings or transplants, as opposed to containerized stock, which makes a big difference if you're planning and planting as the size of your stock differs. So I want to get into that a little bit too, to give you a good idea if you're thinking of taking on a planting, about what the different seedling stock types are and what's the difference. So there's three main types. There's containerized seedlings, there's bare root seedlings, and there's transplants. And the big difference, appearance-wise, you can just tell, is size and if there's soil attached. Containerized stock are trees that are typically grown in a greenhouse, and they are grown in pots, and they come shipped with the soil in them that they were grown. So they're a kind of self-serve plug. Also, they are a little bit easier to store and plant, because you can pop them in the refrigerator. They're not as large, as what I'm trying to get at. And then seedlings and transplants, they're usually grown in outdoor beds, and when they're ready to be sold, they are removed from the beds during dormancy. The soil is shaken off and removed, and they're usually much larger with more robust root system. And so that's why they're called bare root seedlings, is because they do not have any soil attached to them. And then transplants are actually just seedlings that are grown even longer. They're taken from their original growing beds, moved to a larger bed with more space to promote more growth. And so really these ones are going to have really long root systems. There's an example there of somebody holding up a tree, and it's quite possible to get root systems that are anywhere from 2.5 to 3 feet long. It just depends on how long the transplant is there growing. And the reason why I bring this up is if you're considering a planting for maybe 100 trees and you order transplants, you might feel a little bit discouraged trying to get them all planted in Cook County soil where you're hitting a lot of rocks and you're dealing with those large root systems. So it might be better suited for your site to go with a plug or maybe a smaller seedling. So along those lines, I wanted to touch on planning a planting project and how to set yourself up for success. So, like with any other project in life, you should define the purpose and really think about why you're taking on the project and set up some goals for yourself. Maybe you want to plant for some aesthetic purposes and you have a desired look or vision for your property. Maybe you want to plant for wildlife or for pollinators. So you'll consider planting some flowering shrubs or some berry producing trees. Maybe you want to plant for water quality and you want to provide canopy cover and root stability to prevent erosion. Or maybe you want to establish long-lived conifers or try and plant more climate-adapted species for the future. So I'd encourage you to set some goals and develop a plan to accomplish them. The next thing that I would encourage you to do is think about your specific site and the scale of the planting that you want to take on. And some good questions to ask yourself are, how large is your property entirely? And do you really need or want to plant all of it? Or maybe you can take on smaller sections. Do you have roads or access trails that can help get you to your planting sites? You know, Jeff made mention that he finds a tree that he likes in his yard, and from there he builds out and does plantings from there. So coming back to check on the plantings is good. So do you have good site access set up? Another thing to consider is there going to be light competition, or should you consider planting more shade tolerant species? What's already growing there? If you're looking around, can you tell if you have more species that like the root sweat, or do you have species that are more dry loving species? So if you see cedars or black spruce or ash, maybe your site is a little bit more wet than if you're noticing something with red or white pine or even aspen. Another thing to take into account is, what's your soil like? Is it rocky? Probably, but in Cook County, there's not really much avoiding that. But is it easily worked? Are there areas on your property that would be easier to plant than others? And maybe take that into account. So once you've scoped out your site, you have a good idea where you want to plant, you have some goals, what you're trying to accomplish, then you're going to want to order materials. And I would always encourage you to do that sooner rather than later, as our seedling sale sells out quick. The State Forest Nursery sells out quick. And if you really want to plant a specific species like yellow birch or white pine or some of those more favorable trees, get your order in soon. You'll also want to consider, again, are you ordering plugs or are you ordering transplants? How much time is that going to take you? As well as other materials that you're going to need. Are you going to need fencing for browse control? Are you planting trees that are more susceptible to deer browse, such as white pine or red pine or tamarack even? Another thing would be weed suppression mats and staples. Is that something where your tree is going to be outcompeted because of the existing vegetation there and you need to give them a little bit more of a fighting chance? So when planting day comes, you want to make sure that you're set up to get the plants in the ground as soon as possible to prevent the trees from drying out, or maybe to escape the black flies that always hatch during whenever our tree sales arrive, it seems. But some tools that I've found that make planting day a lot easier is a planting bag that's shown there. It's watertight to prevent the roots from drying out. I'm also a big fan of using planting bars. They're pretty heavy, but if you're planting any number of trees, they work much better than a traditional shovel, as it kind of allows you to use your feet and slice through the ground and put your weight into it and create an area that you can plant a tree and then easily seal the soil around the roots in a few simple motions. I also like using a rogue hoe or a hazel hoe for site prep, just mechanically hand sculpting the ground to reduce competition, in addition to the weed mats. So that photo there gives you an example of a weed mat just installed, and then a year later, and how much vegetation encroachment you're already seeing around that young white spruce. And if you're in a really grassy area, I would encourage you to use these even more, because grass can grow up and smother or shade out your trees too. And so lastly, if you're installing fence, it's good to get it set up pretty soon after your planting, just because if you're early in the year, deer can still come by shortly after you've planted if food sources are still limited and browse on the new trees. That's always a little defeating when you plant a tree and it gets nipped right away. But you could also consider repellents or bud capping if fencing wasn't in your plan for that year or desired. So just a few things to keep in mind if you are planning a planting next spring. And it's probably what I wanted to highlight is all of the steps that you are taking to get to planting day should really be happening now or in the fall, later fall, winter, and just a little bit in the spring. So right now is the time to plan and gear up for planting, because if you decide in May after the snow melts that you want to get out there and plant, chances are that there's either not going to be stock available or you just won't have everything set up and lined up. So if you want to plan a planting next year, feel free to give the district a call and I'd be happy to assist with planning one out for you. So that's probably about all I have time for. I know that we're trying to do some rapid fire of the presentations, but I wanted to leave a few minutes if there were any questions that came up in the chat, and as well as my contact information is right there if you wanted to reach out with any questions after the meeting.
Michaela, this is John. Just want to thank you again. Great presentation. It's really a good time of the year to be thinking about the spring, strangely enough. We have to get through winter, but we have some prep to do in advance, and you've laid it out very, very well for people. I appreciate that. As far as the chat goes, if you wouldn't mind, when you are done with your presentation, if you could just go ahead, retype in your contact information into the chat. That'd be great. In fact, I'll say that for all of the panelists tonight. If you would do that after you're done, or even in advance, that's fine too. But that'll allow people to take a look at the chat when you're presenting, or look at your contact information. And Michaela, since Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District is not represented here tonight, if you happen to have their contact, that'd be great, because I'm imagining some of these people who are attending who might actually be in the Lake County area. So thank you again. We'll be shifting gears to the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and that is Mike Hupp, who's going to be representing here. And so thank you, Mike, if you don't mind explaining a little bit of NRCS and what they have to offer.
Sure. Yes. So I'm Mike Hupp with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our agency and what we have to offer. Again, we partner up very closely with the districts as well, soil water conservation districts. They help with all of our planning, and we also have a few positions that are partnered with the districts as well, such as Beth Clanky, who's our Farm Bill Forcer. She works in this area. So with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, we are the primary federal agency that is authorized to work on private lands to help landowners protect their soil, water, and other natural resources. We primarily work in agricultural production fields, but in the recent past farm bills, it has changed to open up different practices for forest landowners, and to provide technical assistance and financial assistance to address different types of resource concerns. We are considered the technical part of the USDA. We have field staff based in 88 USDA service center serving Minnesota landowners. We offer voluntary technical and program assistance to farmers and landowners. We were established in 1933, basically started from the Dust Bowl. We were first called the Soil Erosion Service, and to fight soil erosion, wind erosion, dust storms, loss of cropland. This is mainly due to poor farming practices and drought led to agricultural disasters. 1935, our name was changed to the Soil Conservation Service and became a federal agency under the USDA to work with farmers, new ways to farm that would save the soil. Years later, we were then changed to the Natural Resource Conservation Service as we had started establishing new land uses such as range, pasture land, forest land. So the NRCS has a number of different programs, and they're not all used in all parts of the state or the country. It's just kind of depending on what are the main land uses in the areas. These programs come from the farm bills. They're funded under them. That's where we get all our policy under how the programs can be implemented. And every farm bill, new farm bill that comes out, they're always changing the programs, adding new programs, taking away old programs. So for example, a couple things from our most recent farm bill that we're currently operating under. There was a 2018 farm bill. The main things we're looking at is ensure strong support from American farmers and ranchers, streamline, target, and simplify programs, fulfill Secretary's goals by improving customer service, and continue to offer the types of assistance producers have come to expect and even improve upon them. For example, one of the main programs we use up here for forest landowners is the Environmental Quality Incentive Programs, also known as EQIP. Some of the changes that were done in 2018 Farm Bill was it adds resource concerns. So to meet eligibility for some of these programs, you have to have certain resource concerns that we're trying to address. And the 2018 Farm Bill added additional resource concerns that would make you qualify under the EQIP program. Also raises the cap for organic producers, has new enrollment options to address resource concerns, and it has an advanced payment option as well for the historically underserved producers. And there's a couple of ways that people do qualify under that historically underserved. So like again, the main program we use is EQIP. It is a voluntary conservation program that helps producers promote agricultural production and environmental quality as capable goals. So with this program, it's a lot of people will push right towards for financial assistance, but also this is designed to just address for technical assistance where we can just write you a conservation plan moving forward and come up with a good plan, either a 5 or 10-year plan down the road on how to address different resource concerns on your land, because sometimes going down the road of financial assistance isn't always the best option, because then you're under certain time restraints, and then there's waiting periods to see if you get ranked out high enough and you get approved. So it could be a bit of a waiting game, especially if you're trying to start the work immediately. Unfortunately, these programs aren't quite set up to allow that yet. I'm hoping with the new Farm Bill, it allows us a little flexibility where we can do approvals on the spot. But until then, there is kind of a waiting game. So this is just the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. So like I said, we have multiple different programs, but for this one, here are some of the practices. This is just a small amount of practices that we can provide. I just picked out a few that were kind of addressing forest landowners. Some of the big ones we use a lot is forest stand improvement, tree shrub establishment, woody residue treatment, early successional habitat management, and conservation activity plan. Now, how do you know if these get funded or not is based on the funding for that year. Some years I've seen where 100% of these practices get funded. Other years I've seen not a single practice get funded, or a certain practice. Like for example, for this year's batching period for EQIP, everyone that did apply for a conservation activity plan didn't get funded this year. Money went elsewhere due to EQIP or due to COVID and whatnot. So it kind of depends on the year and how much funding they're setting aside to address the different practices. So kind of the timeline that we're looking at for technical and financial assistance under these programs, kind of how it looks like is we'll first come out, do a site visit and verify, yes, the resource concern is present. And from there, we can go through the different steps, give you some advice of how you can move forward with some of your planning. We can write you a conservation plan, so it gives you in writing of kind of a clear understanding the direction you want to go, manage your forest land. If you are pursuing down the financial assistance part, we would have you fill out an application. And then there's a lot of eligibility paperwork that we need to go through to set up farm records. And then we also add, we offer having an actual conservation plan being done, either by the staff, partner, or TSP, technical service provider. Again, with partners, the SWCD districts, they do partner in that with us, and they do write a lot of our plans. So when requesting assistance from us, it either might be an NRCS staff or someone from the district. So the annual cutoff for ranking and funding for this year, it's currently to be determined for 2021. I'm hoping by the end of October we can have a more understanding when our cutoff dates are for if you'll be into the 2021 funding period. So once we set up a conservation plan, have all your applications in, it then gets ranked at the state level. And then that's where they decide if a plan is going to move forward and it's going to get funding based upon the ranking. And the ranking changes every year depending on the resource concern during that year that they find that they're targeting the most. So some resource concerns have higher ranking levels than others, and then the following year that might switch. So it's different year from year. And then if you do get funded and approved, we come in and sign the contract, and the projects are implemented. The landowner is responsible for completing the work. Some people do get confused on that, where they expect someone to come out on our behalf to actually do the work. But it is 100% on you, whether you do it yourself or you hire a contractor to do that work. That's totally on the landowner's responsibility. There's flexibility who you want to choose to hire for a contractor. That's totally on you. The NRCS is available for assistance then, doing like a pre-construction meeting with the contractor if you do hire one out to make sure everyone's understanding the work to be done. Once the work is completed, the funding is released. Once it's certified that it is completed, you'll contact either NRCS staff member or someone from the districts, and they will come out and certify the work is done and document. And once that's done, they submit for payment, and usually about 2 weeks afterwards, that's when the payment is received. One thing, keep in mind, a lot of people think these are grants. These aren't grants. This is financial assistance, which means this is taxable income. So you will be taxed on any amount that we do assist you with. I'm not going to go into this right now. It's a pretty lengthy video, but this is kind of a cool video that NRCS put together on an example project. It's about 20 minutes long. It's on a landowner, local landowner up here. I'm sure this PowerPoint will be available after the presentation here. Feel free to watch the video. So here's just a couple pictures of before and after. So again, with technical assistance, as of right now, especially with the recent outbreak of spruce bollworm, our big push is to reduce field loads, hazardous field loads, to minimize hazard fire potential. So we are targeting a lot of the dead balsam fir and spruce right now, removing that dead bulbous fuel. And we like to target a lot around homesteads first, especially if they're long, multi-year projects, to create that fuels reduction buffer between you and your homestead. And here's a brush management project that was done before and after. And again, our big push, again, reducing that fuel load, reducing that competition to existing trees. Our big push is to make forests productive again, because a productive forest is a healthy forest. Here are just some good examples of what a difference between some good forest management versus non-management does to your remaining trees. Again, we're looking at trying to get that big timber back in the area, and good forest management is a good start from that. Here's another picture of some tree rings. You'll see how tight these rings are at the beginning of the year, and then they managed that stand, and you saw how much that tree grew after it was managed. And here's another difference between managed forest and an unmanaged forest. If a fire would go through, it's a lot more resilient to a fire. A managed forest is versus unmanaged. Other than that, that's really all I had. Feel free to ask some questions here at the end. Here's our contact information. I'm here in Duluth. Beth is up in Virginia. A lot of times that we're kind of working hand in hand and kind of all over. We have Cook, Lake, St. Louis, and Carleton County. So it's a pretty widespread we cover. But here's our contact information. I can throw it up here at the end as well. Other than that, that's really all I had.
Yeah, Mike, yeah, thank you, Mike. This is John again. Really appreciate it. The visualization of the growth of tree rings there in a managed forest was very impressive. I appreciate that image. That was fantastic. Again, yeah, make sure you put in your contact information, if you would, in the chat. That'd be handy just while we still have time here for the end of the presentations today. Also, just a question for you, just a general question. If people are interested in your programs, is there a certain acreage that you're typically looking at for the equip type programs or some of the other incentive programs?
No, there is no minimal acreage requirement, but it is one thing to think about though, if you're looking going down the contract side of things. You know, if you're a landowner with 3 acres and you got, you know, 1.5 acres of the dead dying balsam fir, is it worth waiting you know, that 10 to 12 month waiting period to see if you get approved for these contracts, or would it be worth going in and just doing the work yourself or getting it done? You know, some people are kind of in a dire situation with all the volatile fuel out there around their homesteads. They'd like to get that work done sooner or later. So that's a conversation I always have to have with the landowners regarding, you know, acreage size. But yes, there is no minimal acreage amount.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And again, if you have questions, feel free to use the chat, which is that little chat icon at the bottom of your screen, and then enter in, make sure you're addressing your comments to the correct group. Should be to the attendees and panelists. That would be great. So thank you again, Mike. And I think what we're going to do next is we're going to pivot over to Thor Packholz with DNR, Private Land Forestry. And Thor has been working with the North Shore Forest Collaborative maybe from the inception. I'm not sure. It's been for quite a while. So glad to have you aboard, Thor. And if you would, you can start sharing your screen and your presentation.
Can we hear me now?
I can hear you, and we're just waiting for you to share your screen.
Oh, good. I'm going to attempt a sort of a storybook approach to things. I'm currently at home. I introduced myself, Thor Packholz, DNR Forestry. I work out of the Duluth office on Rice Lake Road, serving the Cloquet area forestry, as well as Two Arbors Forestry in administration, working with private landowners, Carleton County, southern half of St. Louis County, Lake County, and then as well Cook County. It's quite the expanse of land. And my title properly is private forest, private lands forester. And my day-to-day responsibilities working with the private landowner, wishing to assist them, provide them the means and abilities to plan for practices on their woodlots, support them, empower them with the financial resources, the technical abilities necessary to bring about the benefits to their lands based on their goals and objectives. I work primarily with people who have 20 or more qualifying acres. Part of this is driven by the incentive programs the state legislature has written. I speak of the two primary. One is a amended tax classification of 2C that a person with the 20 or more qualifying acres can amend their tax class from a 1% to a 0.65 of 1%. And in order to enroll in that program, you have to have a management plan. Alternatively, there is a Sustainable Forest Incentive Act, and that program enables a person to see an annual payment made to them of $9 to about $18 per acre, where they enrolled in the program with a current management plan. Current accredited plan writer writes a management plan for them, and then they write a covenant with their county, and then with it, in doing so, would see that annual payment made to them. So my day-to-day is assisting landowners in seeing a management plan written for their property, assisting them with the cost share for that planning, or all other types of cost share that we provide landowners, empowering them in managing their lands. To speak of these programs of cost share that we have, we write assistance, maybe bearing half of the costs of reforestation, planting trees on the property as well, protecting the trees from wildlife, for instance, the deer predation of the trees that are planted. I'm working with a landowner right now who last spring we provided some cost share for planting some 20 acres that had been harvested recently, and he was converting the poplar that had been harvested to conifers, and we provided the cost share for the planting. And then as you experienced, our past summer was rather dry, and he's lost many of the trees that he's planted, and this fall we'll write additional cost share for his planting, where he lost he was not successful in keeping these trees alive, so we'll provide him some assistance financially to plant that area again. And another individual I'm working with who's interested in planting his property, he's experiencing some surprise at some difficulty in obtaining stock, and so we're assisting him in not only writing the practice plan, the cost share for the trees, we're also helping him try to find a better source of trees, and interacting with the nursery to see if trees are available, and if not, where the other trees might be available to the landowner. In the spirit of our activities, we're interested in empowering the landowner such as they can perform these practices. It's recognized that the private landowner makes up a significant part of the landscape, the watershed, and I think it must be, maybe it's more than 16 million acres statewide. State of Minnesota has maybe it was 16.3 million acres of forest land, and I believe 36% of that is private lands. And we recognize the contribution that the private landowner, when managing their lands wisely, not parcelizing the property, ensuring that they have a vigorous, healthy forest free of disease. That is providing a benefit, a service to the state, and thereby seeing that that the state is better off when they're managing things well. The state, in turn, wishes to offer them the incentive to do so, to manage their lands wisely in an ecologically sensitive and let's say a better manner. That way, we're seeing some benefits to the population, to the state, and in turn, we reward the landowner to inspire that activity. And thus, the legislature has provided these programs to better enable the landowner to undertake these things. I can write cost share for landowners who have fewer than 20 acres, but the majority of the people I interact with day to day are the people who are, let's say, aware of these two programs I speak of, 2C Managed Forest Land and Sustainable Forest Incentive Act. And both those programs require a greater 20 acres or greater of qualifying land. And so as a result, anyway, the majority of the people that I interact with are individuals with this larger acreage. However, I'm also interacting with landowners with fewer acres. There are seasons to my work, and I speak of these programs, and enrollment for Sustainable Forest Incentive Act is for new enrollees. The deadline date is the end of this month. And so as of late, I am reviewing management plans, seeing that all the elements and requirements of the plan are present and they're correct to the landowner's property. And I approve that plan, initiate the cost share payment to that landowner. But it's a busy time this season where I'm working to review these management plans for this enrollment in Sustainable Forest Incentive Act. Another season will occur later in the year when we're approaching the deadline for the 2C Managed Forest Land, where landowners need to, who are enrolled in the program, they need to ensure that they have a current a plan that was written within the past 10 years. And as I approach January 2nd, which is that deadline for 2C Managed Forest Land, in terms of making sure that, intending that, making sure that you have that a current management plan that is current within the past, written within the past 10 years. Anyway, as we approach January 2nd, I see a flood of plans I have to review and approve. And of course, with that, the cost share that occurs. There's another season in the spring in terms of enrollment in sustainable, rather 2C Managed Forest Land, where middle May is the cutoff deadline for new enrollment in 2C Managed Forest Land land classification program. And so, and then there's a cutoff in middle June for actively enrolled people in SFIA not middle June, the end of June. You have to have a plan that's current within 10 years. So there's a lot of program administration that I undergo. And then annually, throughout the year, I'm writing cost share for planning practices, cost share planting practices, protection, and assistance with non-commercial harvests, that sort of thing. This time of year, we're thinking about purchasing seedlings for the coming spring. I speak of assisting individuals in planting in the spring, and we're providing cost share for that. But another part of the game is trying to find a location for the seedlings, trying to source out seedlings. Last spring, we had some difficulty on account of COVID, and as a result, many people did not receive seedlings that they had ordered. I ordered seedlings for our school forests, and we did not receive them. We're unable to distribute them for planting in school forests. So I go to the nursery, Minnesota State Nursery, and hopefully we'll be able to order some and provide seedlings to be planted in school forests this coming spring. Puzzling over where we're going to find seedlings for many of these landowners as we move into this coming spring. Speaking of this one individual I'm writing cost share for, he's looking to source some 3,000 conifers, and is surprised at the cost that he's finding, and as well what appears to be limited stock. And so thankfully he's going at this early, and hopefully we'll find some success this way. It would be nice to maybe pool our interests in purchasing seedlings, and were it the case that individuals are wanting fewer seedlings, and if we could consider a mechanism or a means whereby we could source out seedlings in a larger fashion, in larger quantities, that would open us up to purchasing seedlings from some of our Canadian nurseries, where we need to find them from another source that isn't local, or were it the case that people aren't able to find white pine, white cedar, were they buying them in too small numbers to warrant a direct purchase from some of these nurseries. Perhaps we can find individuals who cooperatively want to get together and make an order. Need to determine how to organize such an affair. I wonder what I've said just now, and what I might have neglected to mention.
Or this,
Providing, oh, go ahead, John.
yeah, just a couple of quick questions. When you're finished with your presentation here, feel free to put your information, contact info in the chat itself to the panelists and the attendees, and that'll allow people to get a hold of you. And I just want to make mention of this, and I know you'll be able to talk about this, but there's bound to be questions that come up through your presentation, or Michaela's or Mike's, and people might wonder, who do I go talk to first? And if you could just talk a little bit about that, that would be great. You know, as you know, all of these agencies know each other's programs very well, and you guys work very closely together. And so you can maybe talk about how, if somebody were to knock on your door or call you up, you'd be able to direct them. If it's not your programs, it might be somebody else's.
That's a good prompt. Thank you, John. I primarily work with landowners, private landowners who have larger holdings of land. I'm able to write cost share on a smaller scale, but it's a little bit extra busy work, and the reward may not be there to interest the individual. To speak very specifically, there is a cost share that we could provide for perhaps an example, planting pine trees and then enclosing them from deer predation. And so individually, the tree we might, this year we might be with large conifer. We offer 63 cents of cost share per tree. And then with the enclosure that we would be asking an individual with a 6 foot to erect a 6 foot enclosure around the tree, 4 foot diameter enclosure. They would then in turn receive $10 per enclosure. And if a person, a landowner, is wanting to do this for, excuse me, we're a person on a smaller scale simply wanting to plant 10 pine and 10 enclosure. The reward is moderate. It can be seen as a lot of work, and for me anyway, to put together a practice plan, to enter the information into our database and generate the documents necessary for that. And so we're an individual, let's say, living on the shore. It might be better to look to the collaborative's fencing program for the more economical purchase of the enclosure materials, and then risk not seeing that 63 cents per tree. And so I might steer a person who's wanting to plant and enclose 10 trees to look to the collaborative's fencing program as a way to moderate their costs. There are circumstances where an individual is dealing with invasive species, for instance, buckthorn, and were that individual wanting some cost share, the state cost share program can be seen as a little bit more easy in terms of paperwork and application procedures. They may want to look to the state of Minnesota for that cost share for our struggles with and pulling buckthorn, herbiciding buckthorn, that sort of thing. Whereas alternatively, if you are willing to navigate the federal programs, you might see a greater financial reward, but there's perhaps maybe a little bit more paperwork, or maybe there's a longer wait and an element of uncertainty as to whether they will see the funding for the invasive species removal. Primarily, I would say that in summary, I'm dealing with larger land holdings and in my interactions with the private landowner.
Great. Thank you, Thor. I greatly appreciate you taking the time today to talk to folks about what's going on with not just presently what's available for incentives, but also thinking about the future for trees being available. And I know that might present an issue, but then again, it's amazing how we can pull rabbits out of a hat sometimes. And I also want to make note that we have Clint McFarland from Castle Danger, actually one of the attendees today. And they, Castle Danger, if you weren't aware, has provided trees, tree seedlings in the past couple of years now. So greatly appreciated, and maybe we'll have something to talk about, Clint, next time we're down at Castle Danger, and we can chat about tree seedlings. So And I know that Thor appreciated it again. I think what we're going to do next is we're going to move on to David Abaz and his presentation. David's the executive director through Minnesota Extension of the Minnesota Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. And we'll be talking a great deal about trees here shortly. And I really appreciate you coming on, David, and some very timely conversation and a great segue from Thor to you. So take it away.
Yeah, well, and congratulations for everyone for making it an hour and a half into Zoom. So I am going to go through a bunch of slides really quickly. The main thing is contact me if you're interested. But basically what we're looking at is a climate that is changing. We've had the fires, we've had the deer come in, all sorts of changes over time. And now we've got areas of our region that are 5 degrees warmer than they have been historically. And so typically this forest assisted migration idea is how do we assist the forest in its transition? And you know, one of the issues is we see this scene, as was seen in an earlier slide, our forests have been challenged. Tough species in rocky areas, lacking moisture, and then you have climate change on top with more severe storms, drought times like this summer. I live in Finland and it was a very tough year to grow trees and to grow crops. So what we have predicted is in our area, we're moving from what we'd see as our pristine lake and boreal forests to what is currently present in Dodge County. And this is predicted within 50 years. So more sporadic forest with grasslands. And so as we're looking for coming up with solutions, we're looking at which species are in decline. And if you look at them, they're kind of our backbone of our forest today. And which species might do better in the current trends going on with weather. And so these are things to consider as we're deciding which tree species to put where. Lake Superior provides its own weather pattern, and that provides its own unique opportunity and also challenges. So the idea also is to bring warmer seeds of the same species into our area from zones warmer. And some of the research has shown that species with seed from southern Minnesota planted in northern Minnesota will outperform northern Minnesota seed. And so the idea is to bring in some of the broaden the genetic material of this species by bringing in individual seed collecting from other areas of the state that are warmer. So it's most adaptive to our changing climate, whatever we have, wetter, drier, the whole thing, just a bigger, broad spectrum of genetic material. So through research, collaboration, and growers network. And I'm going to do this in about 6 minutes, so bear with me. So we have a growers network this past spring and summer. We worked with students to identify farmers by working with the different agriculture groups in our area. And then we identified farmers that are interested in learning more about growing tree seedlings. And these farmers are throughout the area. You can see a lot along the North Shore. And the idea is to build this network of diversified tree seedling growers. Not only is it a potential income source for the farmers, but it takes all that money that's leaving Northeast Minnesota and going to Canada and Michigan and Pacific Northwest and leaving it here and building our economy here. Building a little more resilience into it by having multiple growers within our area. And so now we're in the seed collection aspect. We're working with UMD, Nature Conservancy on some protocols on seed collecting. So really it's about seed gathering through a grant with both my organization and with the Institute on the Environment. Some of the trees of interest, what we're looking at for this coming year, look at the ones in red here, bur oak, northern red oak, white pine, yellow and white oak. Those are seeds we're gathering right now. So these are seeds that will be available in spring of 2022 for you and others to plant. Other trees of interest, we haven't planted them yet, but there are interests of some other tree species that are in southern Minnesota. A controversial issue, but one that we're exploring, looking at the science and talking with people about that. There'll probably be a limited quantity of these 3 species, but the bulk of it and the bulk of where we're going is with the 5 species on the left, which are present but need to and will become more dominant if we provide the seeds for them. January, February, we'll be training the farmers. We're actually working with the DNR State Nursery with Christina Soames, and she's going to be helping us with training on container growing, all those plug growing, and bare root growing. In March, we'll be planting our first seeds. We have an order from Nature Conservancy for 40,000 trees. We're hoping to create 10 times more demand in following years. But these trees will be planted, seeds will be planted in March. And then, you know, mostly we're going to be doing northern red oak. We have some white, some bur, a bunch of white pine, and now we've just found a good cache of yellow birch seeds. So hopefully we'll have a bunch of yellow birch to offer. As we go into summer and fall, then we're just growing, the farmers are growing these. And we'll probably have 4 to 5 farmers growing these trees this year, but as we increase the numbers, we'll add more and more farmers to this growers network. Both container, right now our vendor, Nature Conservancy, is wanting all plugs. So that's what we're going to be growing. But if Soil Water Conservation District or your collaboration wants different trees, please let us know and we will work that into one of the farm's plans. And then the big thing is May. We will deliver our first tree seedlings. Primarily it'll be plugs. Even though they're not as big, there's less root disturbance with initial planting, and you can plant them quickly with a planting bar, a tree planting bar. And so this is just a real quick overview of what we're doing here with the kind of community-based, research-based, bringing communities, university together to explore a new model for growing tree seedlings. So when Thor says we're running out of trees or it's hard to find, that's what we're hoping to fill, especially with those really interesting species like yellow birch. And I hope next year we'll be offering, the next cycle, we'll be offering basswood, another species that grows quite well inland, especially where I am in Finland and along the North Shore. And so these are the types of things we're working with, massaging, and working together with a lot of different players to try and build a new system to provide seedlings for our Northeast Minnesota region.
David,
And that's it for me.
yeah, David, this is John. Just maybe a quick question. If people on this call, individuals who have land on the North Shore are interested, maybe it's small numbers, does that matter? Can they just call you anyways?
Yes, I think it'll be really great. I know the DNR can only do large amounts, and we're working closely with them to be complementary. Soil and Water District does bunches. Yeah, I think either you can work as a collaboration and come up with an order together, what you want for spring of 2022 of the species we'll have, which will be 8 different species potential. And I'm actually hoping this Growers Network will set up an online purchasing option as well. So there'd be ways to just go online, plug it in, pick your trees, and we'd put that as part of our network growing. If there's a lot of demand from your organization, then we need to know a year plus ahead so that we can plant. If there's species you want planted, we need to know now for 2 years from now. So as we're looking for seeds for these trees, we'll have time to do that. And so this will be much more approachable because literally it's your neighbors and nurseries and farms in the area that are exploring this option.
Great. Thank you, David. I greatly appreciate this presentation. It's very timely. So it's something we've been trying to address in a few different ways, but this is moving very quickly, and I really appreciate it. if you would, please, when you are done with your presentation now, if you would go ahead and put in your contact information into the chat so people can take a look at and be able to contact you.
Well, thank you for this opportunity.
You bet. Next, we're going to have up to our final panelists, and that's Mike Reichenbach. Many of you know Mike with Minnesota Extension, and he's got a presentation, and we're going to sort of pivot towards more of a community building work here with a variety of polls and ways in which we can communicate amongst ourselves here as attendees and panelists. So go ahead and take it away, Mike.
Okay, thank you. So we've had a lot of great presentations, a lot of good information. What I'm hoping for in this presentation is that you'll spend some time answering poll questions, and we will provide those results for you after each poll. But also, I see that a lot of folks have been active in the chat, and I'm going to ask you to continue being active in the chat, putting in some answers open-ended to some of my open-ended questions. So with that, what to expect, I've talked about the polls in the chat. I want to mention a little bit about what I see in the future as far as like spruce budworm planting and protection, some things that we've learned, and we'll have Dana Dixon jump in and talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about creating space for trees, and I know Jeff Nifke already talked about how he creates space, but both creating space for the trees that we want to plant in the future and removing or reducing density of balsam fir will help reduce fire risk, future fire risk, which I think will become more of an issue in the future. I'm not going to talk about tools and resources. I want to give you more time to provide us feedback, and then we'll go into an open discussion and Q&A. So the first is a poll. And I'll let Kelsey go ahead and bring this poll up so that everybody can answer it. This is the question you'll see in the poll.
You will take your mouse and you will drag it over to any of the things that you have done. You can do multiple choice and just click on the multiple ones that you have done.
And if there are some not listed, please chat. Put your responses in the chat.
Just going to give you
And
a
so,
second
Kelsey?
more. It looks like we're having people still clicking. So hold on 1 second.
Good. And I can't see the chat anymore. Can you
And
tell?
there is nothing in the chat right now.
Okay, I want to encourage people, if there's some things you've been doing that aren't listed here, type that into the chat. There we go. We've had responses: walk or check the property lines, check the fencing around your trees. That's great. Planting and fencing is good. Building trails, that's something. As I visit landowners, many landowners are doing that. We're seeing more and more landowners reaching out to their neighbors and helping them with tree planting or care or answering questions about trees. So thank you.
Yep, and Dana says top 3 in the chat.
I'm sorry, say again, Kelsey?
He just says this top 3. That's what Dana said in the chat.
Got it. Okay. Okay, a little bit on spruce budworm. I think many of you may be experiencing or are near areas where spruce budworm has been affecting the balsam fir. And the name is spruce budworm, but it actually is more deadly to balsam fir, but it affects both white spruce and balsam fir. Just to give you an idea of this has been around for a long time, and I expect it to be around a long time. One of the biggest differences, though, from what we have now and what we had, say, in 1912, when there were 20 million cords of dead balsam fir, and let me translate that into an area for you. 20 million cords of dead balsam fir is an area about 40 by 40 miles, equivalent to roughly twice the size of Carleton County or roughly the size of Pine County. So this affected a lot of trees back then. What we have now is we have more balsam fir in our forests than we had in 1912 for lots of reasons that I won't go into. We can talk more about it, or you can send me a note after you get my email address and I can go through it. But today what we're seeing, at least in 2018, 2019, and probably here in 2020, is we're having about 200,000 acres of trees affected a year. That's an area equivalent to about 4 times the size of Duluth, Minnesota. And so to deal with this on your property, thinning, balsam fir, spruce, if you've got more than 800 trees per acre, now to give you an idea of what that's like, if it's too thick to walk through, you're probably at about 800 stems per acre. You might want to think about thinning, especially if it's balsam fir. I know Jeff Nifke, earlier presenter, is probably removing most of the balsam fir and then replanting or fostering trees that are already there. I'd recommend removing about half or more of the trees. And then if you're retaining trees, keep the ones that are the healthiest. And so that brings us to a poll. I'd like to hear from you. What do you see with spruce budworm on your property, if anything?
And again, take your mouse and you'll drag it over to your categories, and it's multiple choice. So you can pick all of them or just one.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Not a problem. I just want to mention, somebody in the chat mentioned they also removed spruce something. Let's see, spruce budworm damaged balsams. So just another note.
So he's seeing spruce budworm with damage on balsam fir.
Sounds correct. Yep.
Okay, great. So we're getting some people working to reduce fire risk from the dead balsam on their property. That's great. Concerned about it. I know when you see this, it's after a couple of years, it kills the balsam. And so planting and the types of planting we're typically talking about with landowners to restore long-lived conifers is 10, 15 long-lived conifers per acre. It provides a seed source for the future. So clearing out these, especially people that have been planting for 20 years, those trees are just now starting to produce seed. So if you can clear out an area, you can clear out an area that might catch seed and you get natural regeneration. So moving on, this is where I'd like Dana Dixon to go ahead and turn on his microphone and join me in talking about a few of the tricks of the trade. Dana, some of these have come from you, and let's hear about your thoughts on these.
Okay, well, I'm here on the recording progress. I use a GPS and mapping software to track where I've planted trees and to figure out where I want to plant trees each year. I found that my capacity for planting is about 50 trees a year. And so I try to pick an area on the family property here where I can, draw some boundaries and figure out where I can plant. The other thing that I use that for is mapping where the right-of-ways are, because I don't want to plant trees where the highway department or the power company is going to remove them for me. There are a variety of softwares that you can do with this on. I've actually got one that works on my laptop or on my phone, so I can create the map on my laptop and take it out in the woods with me on my phone, or if I'm walking and trying to figure out the boundary of, say, a intermittent stream, I can mark that in the spring when it's very visible and then plan my plantings accordingly. The next one down, paper clips on fencing, that's actually from Sue Fod. It's pure genius as far as I'm concerned. They're small, they're unobtrusive, easy to have a bunch of them in your pocket, and you can mark how tall the tree is from year to year. It's a neat system and it works well. Taking pictures of the trees. If you participate in the fencing program, you will be asked to submit 2 pictures a year. It's good to take those pictures while you're doing the planting. Excuse me. On fencing, I advocate cutting 4 fences out of a 50-foot roll rather than 5. The reason is you end up with a 4-foot diameter rather than a 3-foot diameter exclosure, and about a 50% increase in the amount of foliage that is protected, and more protected foliage gets you more growth. Fence in place until trees are about 15 to 18 feet tall. Yep, I took the first fence off of a tree that my brother planted about 16 years ago this year. So if you take them off too soon, and I had a tree here, again, that my brother had planted, it was about 8 feet tall, and somebody being helpful took the fence off so that the tree could spread its wings, as it were, and within 2 months, the deer had turned it into a flagpole. Well, that's what I can think of one thing that we didn't list here, Mike. When I go around in the spring marking my exclosures, I use 2 colors of tape. I use orange so I can find them every year. So they can disappear into the forest. And then I use a green tape, a piece of green flagging tape to mark those that might need special attention. Say the exclosure was damaged by deer, or the tree inside the exclosure was looking a little sickly, and I'll check on those more frequently.
Great. Dana, thanks for that. And folks who, if you don't know Dana Dixon, he's been planting trees, and Dana, I think you've done more than 50 trees a year in some years. It's been a lot of work for you, but it's really paying off. So thanks for sharing some of your tips. And I know Ari Fuad is on the line. I don't know if Sue is there. The paper clips is when I heard this one, I thought it was just genius. So great idea. Keeps track of how tall that tree is year after year. So if there's other tips and tricks of the trade that you can share with us in the chat, please do so.
Mike,
Yes.
this is Molly, and there's a question in the chat that I think is a good one from Clint.
Okay. Go ahead and read it. I can't see the chat.
I've noticed damage on some of the white pines I planted. Do budworm attack the white pines? I've also found pine sawfly on some of my white pines. Does anyone know if they will become a problem for white pines in our area?
Yeah, the spruce budworm do not affect the pines, but pine sawfly, I haven't heard of it before as being a problem. I can go ahead and check back on that, and we can get the information out through the collaborative. So I'm writing this down so that I remember to do that. Okay. So we've already talked about some of this: space for trees and reducing fire risk, thinning, removal of balsam fir, create some planting space. And then, as Jeff has done and others have done, look for that natural regeneration, create sites to capture natural regeneration. And that means exposing some bare mineral soils. And so those are just some tools. So I want to find out now, what are some of the obstacles you've encountered when planting, protecting, or caring for your woodland? And if there's something not listed here, please type in the chat.
Again, this one is multiple choice, so you can answer more than one.
Okay. And lack of time was the top one listed. I'm not surprised. There's lots going on. The lack of experience with tools. This came up in our last Master Woodland Owner class, and it's something that that I'll talk to Molly and talk to John about. How do we go ahead and increase our experience with tools, whether that be a chainsaw or a professional grade brush saw, or how to sharpen a shovel so that we can better plant trees, or what type of shovel to buy if we're going to use a shovel, as opposed to a tree planting spade if you can't, the tree planting bar if you can't get a hold of one of those. Don't know where to find contractors. I've got a beginning of a list that may help you do some of that. I see that physical limitations are listed, and maybe the contractor list will help a bit with that. And so I hope some folks have maybe chatted in what some of these others are.
Yep, happy to read those for you. Rocky's
Sure.
so far little to no luck with planting white pine placed in hollow old stumps. And then we have more about rocky soil full of roots as well. I think that's
Yeah.
most of it. Oh, hard to find enough dirt to plant trees, especially near the shore.
Yeah, I'll touch on the hard to find enough soil or dirt to plant the trees, especially if you've got seedlings. So if you buy container grown, it's a smaller thing to put in the ground. One of the landowners, and I saw that they were on there, so they're participants tonight, gathered very small white pine seedlings and planted them and protected them with fencing. And when I say very small, I believe these were probably 2 to 3 inches tall at most, and had very good success in transplanting those from the garden in Minneapolis, St. Paul area up to the North Shore. So planting even smaller seedlings can be successful. I believe it took more work and possibly a little bit of watering to keep those going, but that is one idea that has worked for at least one landowner. Okay, some resources, and I am going to copy. Oops, I'm going to go backwards so you can get that. So I've got a little bit of information on budworm, but that contractor and nursery list, it's z.umn.edu/tree planting workers. And that will give you some contractors that are at least in the general area of the Arrowhead. I'm still developing this list, so if there's someone you know of that's not on this list, send me an email and I'll go ahead and get that out to everybody. I'll make sure that this goes into the chat before the chat's closed, and then we'll go ahead and save the chat, and I think John will get that out. So with that, I'll put this contact information also into the chat, and you'll have that. John and Kelsey, if I think we can open it up for general questions and promote everybody to panelists.
Yep, so what that means, you guys, is I'm going to put up a poll that just asks you how you found out about us, about this presentation today, and I'm going to ask you to respond to it, and then I'm going to transition you over to be allowed to talk and share your video. You don't have to do those things if you don't want to, though, but it allows you to have a little bit of community time. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to put it into the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to start now. And as I'm doing that, I want to say thank you to John so much for collaborating with us to make this come together. It's such an exciting opportunity to share learning of this sort together as a community, as it impacts us all so much.
Thank you as well, Kelsey. If you could let people know how to find the recorded presentation after the fact, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have that on our website at mycche.org. I'll also be sending out an email to you all after the event with that recording link in it, as well as any handouts or any materials that any of the presenters want. So look for that tomorrow or Monday. And I'll also include any other details that they think is important to be sharing with you. You're welcome to chat now amongst yourselves if you want, as well as share your videos.
Hi, this is Molly Thompson. We'll also put the link on the North Shore Forest Collaborative website and Sugarloaf's website, so you can access the Zoom link there.
Kelsey, I cannot share my video for some reason. I think maybe you've locked me on your end.
Oh no, I will get everybody unlocked. So don't worry, I'll be going through.
Good.
If anybody has any questions or wants to talk about anything, this is a nice time to take a moment and think about the things you've been learning tonight or things you maybe didn't learn about tonight that you'd love to talk about in the future.
Elon, I don't see you.
That's all right. I'll give it to you.
And
I'll just do one other little note here. If you're interested in all the links that were in the chat too, or the chat questions, you can save the chat on your screen by going to the right of where it says to all panelists and attendees in the chat box. Click the down arrow and it'll say save chat. And so you can kind of save, and that'll save onto your computer.
And I can also send that out to you too. So if there's any confusion about how to do that, I heard just today about how some people can't do that if they have an iPad.
I was just going to note that.
Yeah.
Hey, Thor, I forgot to ask you to clarify for people what you mean by qualifying acres. You mentioned, let's say somebody has 20 acres, but they have a house on it. Might not necessarily meet that threshold. You can talk about that.
That's a good question, John.
They
With,
can't see. So if you start your video, then they'll be able to see.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. With Sustainable Forest Incentive Act, if you have 20 acres but a structure on it, then you would have to deduct 3 acres as non-qualifying, and so as a result, you would only have 17 qualifying acres. Alternatively, if you had, say, 25 acres with a structure, you would be deducting 3 as non-qualifying, and then therefore you would have 22 qualifying acres. As you're around 20 acres with a structure, the Sustainable Forest Incentive Act only has a 3 acre with 2C managed forest land tax classification. With a structure on your property, you're deducting 10 acres. And so were you with that 25 acres, you would only have 15 qualifying acres. So anyway, there are circumstances where some of your acreage may not qualify for either of these programs. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah. David, I'm sure your presentation stirred a lot of thoughts. I noticed in the chat that Castle Danger is going to be providing 4,500 seedlings this spring. I'm guessing they ordered those already, but maybe there's a conversation we need to have at some point here with them and others who might be interested in additional training.
Well, it'll be delayed a year because we're planting for the first time this year, but then we'll have trees each year.
Alexa, stop desktop 3.
Say that again, Ray?
Hear who that was.
I think that was Ray Thorn, Thron.
Not sure. Oh, Ray, did you have something to say or to add?
Yes, sorry about that. I didn't intend to do that. Thank you.
Good. So, Michaela, any thoughts on what you've been hearing today? Hopefully, you'll get some additional customers coming in, knocking on your door.
Sure. I guess I'll just reiterate, if you close the door on this webinar and a couple weeks down the road you're thinking about what you want to do with your land, as always, feel free to give the Conservation District a call. We're here and happy to help. And as far as if you're thinking, oh man, I don't know who to call first, should I contact Thor? Should I contact Mike? We're here at the district to help steer you in the right direction and kind of do a little scoping with you right away of what size project you want and what would be the best fit for your land. So we're here, give us a call.
Mike, any thoughts here as we're wrapping things up a little bit?
Yeah, it really, when it comes down to you're trying to figure out who to call, the districts or NRCS, really we kind of partner with each other and we do the same thing. So we'll steer you in the right direction no matter who you call. They work on the same programs we do. And if we do need to task it out to one or another, we'll get you in the right direction and we'll go from there.
I see Wayne Russ is still on the call here. Wayne, thank you for being with us. Many of you might not be aware, it was Wayne and others who were founders of the North Shore Forest Collaborative, the vision, and have been working with us this entire time since there was former Forest Service employee, now retired, enjoying himself on the North Shore, but still actively engaged in our activities. So any words of wisdom, Wayne, what you're hearing tonight and where we need to take it?
Well, I do have some points I'd like to make, and I don't know how much time you want to spend with it since we're over what we had anticipated. But I do have some points I'd like to bring out. Are you open for a little time, or is that kind of closing time?
People can leave at any time. This is really an opportunity for community building around these subjects, so absolutely fine.
John, it looks like there's one question in the Zoom chat. Maybe it'd be appropriate to answer that before.
As former director of the office involved in developing a vaccine, calls the president's comments to not fear coronavirus recklessness.
Am I hearing?
Do you want me to read it for you?
Yeah,
No, I don't think so. It was about planting acorns. If somebody finds good acorns, or if they were able to get those, can they just plant them into the ground?
I got the answer typed in chat.
Oh,
Awesome.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So you can poke them in the ground, but if you're collecting acorns, especially white oak acorns, you're going to be better putting them in a pot. And this can be any type of pot, clay or plastic, or it doesn't have to be anything special. Get them about 1 to 2 inches under, and then cover that with leaves so that you don't get a freeze thaw cycle, multiple cycles on them. And I've done that, in the garden after I put my garden to bed for the year. I just have planted the acorns out in pots, covered them up, and in the spring, I just go out and look for the new growth, and then I transplant them pretty quickly out of those pots to something that's more suited.
Thank you. So Wayne, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. At the risk of sounding a little bit contradictory to some of the statements made earlier, the collaborative does have some recommendations for planting along the shore based on some ecological examination and so on, experience over the years, and I'll just hit some highlights of that. And that first thing that you brought out, John, in your talk about the species included are kind of the ones that would be recommended throughout along the shore, but there is a difference between the north and the south. From Beaver Bay North, and most of our folks here would probably be in that group. We're looking at from a highest to lowest priority of the higher priority species are white cedar, white spruce, white pine, yellow birch, and tamarack in a descending order. And in the southern part of the collaborative area, it would only be changed by having white pine first and white cedar take its place in the third place. So there are other species we're interested in planting. Now, that's not to say that they are the only ones, but they are the top priority ones. And others that would include red oak and elm, basswood. Some of those have been brought out. Black ash might be included if we get through the emerald ash borer problems and find that we can restore it or need to restore it. And another point is that there is a bigger or a more expansive explanation of some of this stuff on our website, by the way. I did want to ask David later on if he had received our email about tree species that we'd like to include in his order list. And we can talk about that later. That was just on my notes here. Just a clarification, the trees to plant are based on your site conditions. So, you just don't kind of willy-nilly throw out these big things on your property. It really depends on what kind of site you have and what the potential is for your what kind of trees would be best suited for your property. And we're not looking, the Forest Collaborative isn't looking for the notion of planting as you might see a forester plant for a typical commercial reforestation effort. We're trying to establish the native species and perhaps some of the changes expected in species. But to bring back the native species doesn't mean you have to plant wall to wall on your property. So it doesn't mean that you have to spend all your time trying to plant all across your property. It means trying to bring back the natives on your property, but that also means that you have to be pretty cognizant of the need for silviculture. In other words, taking care of those trees so they make it through to be able to compete against the other tree species on your property. And that includes several things that have been mentioned here tonight, and I certainly don't have to go into any more deeper than that. But I just wanted to bring out some of those points. There are many other things that we could talk about. And in fact, I'm available to talk with anybody that has any questions about the area. I plant trees on my property. I've been involved in Forest Service and planting and ecosystem management for many, many years. And so, I have some ideas and knowledge about the area. So if anybody would like to talk about it and our organization, I'm certainly here.
Thank you, Wayne. Mike, things that you're hearing tonight, what's your big takeaways from your perspective?
Which Mike are you speaking to, John?
The guy who just asked the question.
I think that one of the things that really came out in the surveys is that one of the barriers out there, lack of time is the big one, but use of tools was much higher than I expected. But I shouldn't have been surprised, because that's come up almost every Master Woodland Owner Lost Forest class, is how do we best use tools? And I remember when we could meet face to face, I used to teach how to sharpen a shovel and how to use a shovel properly out there for planting trees. And because we're not planting trees, as Wayne says, like most foresters would for commercial production, using a shovel, taking a little bit more time to get those trees in the ground, I think is something that's well worth it. And I just want to second some of the things that Wayne said. You know, we've got to pick the right sites when we're out there on the property. What trees are best for this area? And then looking at the microsites, you know, if you've got the opportunity to go ahead and pick that little site that maybe has a little bit more shade or for the roots so that it doesn't overheat on that northern white cedar, you know, those types of nuances are something that it's hard to do online like this. It's really better to do when you get Michaela or someone else out on the property walking it.
Good point. Yeah, thank you. I also, my takeaway too from the polls is that people are looking for help. And I think we as agencies devoted towards making these good things happen need to build in programs that allow that to happen, at least connect people more effectively to those resources. So I think we began doing that a little bit with the fencing program, but I think an expansion of that type of service needs to be considered by multiple agencies. Any other thoughts or questions? Maybe related to the presentation.
Yeah, John, real quick, I wanted to say for the folks that are left, you know, the link I put out for that resource list of where to find contractors, that's in development and it's not complete. It's got some nurseries listed. It's certainly not all of them. Michaela mentioned a nursery that I didn't get in there. So if Michaela can go ahead and send me that name of that nursery, I can get it in there. But if others know of a contractor that does work, whether it be planting trees or fencing or other types of work that you need around the property that you've got, you know, I'd be happy to put it, you know, add them to that list.
Molly, you did yeoman's work here helping in the chat tonight. I greatly appreciate it. Any comments you'd like to add on here as we wrap things up from Sugarloaf?
I apologize. I got a dog barking in the background. I did one quick thing. Sugarloaf does have tools that people can borrow. So that's something to think about. Maybe next summer we do have the shed, the invasive shed, where you can learn about treating your invasive plants. But part of that also is a variety of tools that you can borrow also from us. Shovels, helmets, stuff like that. But thank you, everybody.
Great, thank you. And again, thank you, Kelsey, with Cook County Higher Education. This has been a fantastic way to reach out for people in very unusual times. Normally we would have this sort of landowner meeting together, and yet this worked out very nicely, I think, and hopefully people can come away with some good information and ways to get active on their own properties and work together as a community to do some good things on the landscape. So
This is Thor joining in. To the subject of tools, I believe that landowners can come to DNR forestry offices throughout the state and go to them and request planting bars, backpack water sprayers for burning. You can borrow shovels and other tools. Certainly that's one resource to consider. Going to forestry, you can have conversations with people and hear some good advice, or at times advice that would steer you in the wrong direction. We have lists of service providers. I can, for instance, come up with a fairly good list of nurseries to consider. And so, but in the spirit of things anyway, talk to people. Forestry has an ear and often ideas that could benefit the landowner.
thank you, Thor. And thank you one and all. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And if it's an early weekend, have a great weekend as well. So thanks again, Kelsey.
Thank you, John. Thank you everyone for attending. Again, we'll be sending out an email on Friday and or Monday